Well, it never ceases to amaze me. When you ask someone for proof that the earth is old, you get a one or sometimes a two-word response as their complete answers. I'm curious if you know what any of those answers actually are. What is the first thing you hear when somebody says while trying to prove the earth is billions of years old? I can think of a couple. Let me throw some out that I've thought of. You guys throw them out too. By the way, I got to turn on my comments here so I can see you guys. Man, you guys got the chat going on. Hey guys, good to see everybody on here. Diana, good to see you on here. Gary, good to see you on here. A couple things I can think of. You guys throw them in the chat. What do you guys hear when you hear the earth is old? Proof the earth is old. Here's a couple. Dinosaurs. Yeah. Or you'll hear starlight. Yeah. Or you'll hear, the geologic column. Yeah. Or fossils. It's always one or two-word answers. Carbon dating. That's a big one they throw out there. What they actually mean is radiometric dating, but since most people really don't know what the difference is anyway, and they don't know what they're talking about, who cares? Today, the old Earth worldview is going to come tumbling down. And we're going to start with a two-word answer, carbon dating. Let's tackle that in today's conversation. What about carbon dating?
Carbon-14 happens to be a radioactive isotope, which means it emits energy and particles and turns into a different atom. And so it's going to turn into nitrogen. It's going to go in the air and become part of the atmosphere. So this is kind of gives us an egg timer, and it goes tick, 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 tick. And then after 100,000 years, in theory, all that radiocarbon should be gone from any sample. Radiocarbon works for samples that come from, let's say, the last 2,000 years or so.
Welcome to the Creation Today show, where we bring together interviews with experts and solid Bible teaching. Your host, Eric Hovind, affirms the ultimate authority of God's Word, the truth of creation, and why it matters to you.
Hey, if you're joining us from Facebook or on YouTube, or you're part of our podcast or television audience, thank you guys for peeking into the Creation Today community for this conversation. We are a group of people that are being discipled through weekly conversations so that we can be all that God has called us to be. If you ever want to join our community, all you have to do is come on over to creationtoday.org and partner with us. You can find these shows and this show and many more at our website, creationtoday.org/on-demand, and you can go back and watch any of the shows that we've produced. Partners, guys, I love you guys. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Not only do I love you guys, but you guys are going to love today's guest for my conversation on carbon dating. We do have a very special guest joining us. He received his master's in biotechnology in 1999 from Stephen F. Austin State University. He got his PhD in paleobiochemistry in 2019 from the University of Liverpool. He taught junior high and high school at a Christian schools, a couple different ones in Texas, as well as biology, chemistry, and astronomy as an adjunct and assistant professor in the Dallas area universities. In 2008, he joined the Institute for Creation Research as a science writer. He is now a research scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about carbon dating with me, help me welcome our friend, Dr. Brian Thomas. Dr. Thomas, welcome back to the Creation Today show, buddy.
Thanks for having me on, and good to see you again.
Since you're from the Institute for Creation Research, I thought I'd just ask, what are you guys up to? What are you guys researching these days?
Well, each of our scientists, including me, has like a separate project that we try to keep up with. I'm working on some new exciting results. We have a collagen protein sequence from a new dinosaur bone, and so we're going to be working on publishing that in the scientific literature. And then after that, I'll show you the paper, and then you could say, hey, to your friends and say, hey, what do you think of this? What does this mean? And then people can reach their own conclusions on that. We're also doing a big project right now with cave fish. These are blind cave fish. And we're looking at we're trying to test how long does it take the sighted cave fish that live at the surface It's the Mexican blind tetra, Astyanax mexicanus, and they're common in Mexico and even in central Texas, where they've pioneered the different waterways. How long does it take the sighted fish to lose their sight? They actually don't just go blind, they actually trade their sight for a whole suite of features that enable them to detect their environments without eyes. And so anyway, we're doing some research on that, very exciting. Sharing our first results later this month at the International Conference on Creationism in Ohio. So
I will be there.
Yay.
I'm excited about this. That is awesome. And what I find interesting is, and it's almost like it's exactly like you guys have been saying for years. You can do all the research, you can present the papers, there's the paper, and then some evolutionary scientist is just going to either ignore it or just try to reinterpret it from his own perspective rather than, I say, letting the data speak. They're going to look at it through their worldview, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Man.
for the most part. But it's like when Jesus tried to do ministry with the Pharisees. Like most of them resisted all the evidence that was right in front of them, healing of people, raising people from the dead. They're like, you're doing these works by the devil. I mean, come on. But one out of 100 said, you know what, this can't be of the devil. This has to be from God. But in order to adopt that whole view that Jesus is actually God, instead of all their friends who are saying Jesus is like, he's a false prophet. So they had to suffer the ostracism from all their Pharisee friends just to go on the Jesus side, and that's probably why Nicodemus met Jesus at night, because he's like sneaking around going, Jesus, can I talk with you? So anyway, so we have the same kind of social phenomenon where we're scared to go against the flow sometimes.
What a great analogy and biblical reference to see exactly what's happening today. That's a powerful thought, because it's going against the flow, and you got to be willing to do that. Not many scientists are willing to risk their paycheck or their pension or their tenure, things like that, in order to go against the flow. Wow. Hey, am I allowed to share with them? You and I have been working on a project too that I think I think that's kind of cool. Can we share that with them?
Let's do it.
I went over to the Dallas area and went to the Discovery Center where Dr. Thomas works, as well as his other scientist friends. That's where Institute for Creation Research is headquartered. And we got to film the third in the Night at the series movies. We did Night at the Creation Museum, Night at the Ark Encounter. And we filmed, and we're trying to finish up right now the edits on Night at the Discovery Center. Check this out.
I thought I would take you on a tour of the Discovery Center. If we have time.
Yeah, you guys better hurry. The lights will be going off soon.
Oh, well, let's run.
This is the Origins exhibit.
Okay, so this film takes some nice twists and turns, and I don't know, Brian, I'm actually really happy with what we've got so far. I think it's really turned out good. Good storyline. Great acting, by the way, Brian. Dr. Thomas. I was blown away, man. You did so good. This is incredible. It's like this is your second career is a movie actor.
Yeah, not quite.
I was blown away. Seriously. I thought, wait till you guys see it. Okay. Really, 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 really good. Okay. We got to jump into carbon dating here. Radiometric dating, to be specific. Can you give everybody real quick an overview of what is radioactive carbon dating? Radioactive dating first, carbon dating is a portion of it. What is an isotope? Things like that. What's really going on with carbon-14 dating?
Well, like you said in the intro, carbon dating is a word that people that I talk with throw around. But what they mean by that is like isotope dating. But there's several different isotope systems. And so with any one of these systems, the fundamental operation works by comparing ratios. So like this to that, right? And so with an isotope, you have different versions of an atom. And in the carbon atom isotope system, you got carbon 12, 13, and 14. And so what we measure with accelerator mass spectrometers, and I've never used one, but I have friends who do, they measure the ratio of carbon 12 to carbon 14. They also measure the ratio of 13 to 14. And so what causes these balances or these ratios? And that's the whole question that science cannot answer. That's the piece that nobody seems to remember, because in order to know what caused this, more of this and less of that, or more of that and less of this, what caused that? You have to have like instruments, like detectors in the rock or in the artifact, the entire history of that, of its time underground, in order to know where is it coming from, where is it going, how did it get there? But we don't have that. All we have is the ratio now. Like, here's the ratio as it is now, and it is decaying. So the more that this radiocarbon decays, it turns into nitrogen, it leaves the system. So this is the carbon-14 is decaying, the carbon-12 stays constant. At least it doesn't decay radioactively. But carbon-14 happens to be a radioactive isotope, which means it decays. It emits energy and particles and turns into a different atom. And so it's going to turn into nitrogen. It's going to go in the air and become part of the atmosphere. So eventually, the radiocarbon in any sample is all going to turn into nitrogen after something like 100,000 years, like at most. So this is kind of gives us an egg timer, and it goes tick, 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 tick. And then after 100,000 years, in theory, all that radiocarbon should be gone from any sample. So that's like some of the basics. Does that help any?
It does. So basically, you're comparing how much of this compared to how much of this. And then over time, one of them is going to go down, the other one's going to stay constant. So you're trying to basically use the amount that it's gone down to judge how much time has passed.
Right. But when we use this isotope system as a clock, we're assuming that there are no other factors that have influenced the amounts. And it turns out that there are other factors that influence the amounts. In other words, you could bring in radiocarbon from somewhere else and make it look like it's younger, or you can leach out natural processes can leach out some of that radiocarbon and make it look older. And so what has gone on in the past? And it's hard to tell.
So we don't really have, because I like to think of it as an exact science, but the exact part is the amounts, not necessarily the interpretations of what either added or subtracted the amounts.
Exactly. So yeah, and by the way, the precision, or should I say accuracy, the precision is really high, but with these measurements, but the accuracy also very high. Accurate meaning, like, do the numbers on our paper as a result of our test reflect the actual ratio that's in the sample? And that's really high also for radiocarbon. So it's a very, very precise and very accurate reading. Okay, but the question, but that's just a ratio. That's right. Not an age. And so how do you convert a ratio into an age? Well, you have to use a formula, a conversion formula. And what does that formula contain? Variables. Some of those variables we cannot fill in with any measurable science. We have to make assumptions to fill in numbers into those, to take the place of those letters, those variables. And it turns out that those assumptions are at risk in many cases.
Okay, well, I'm curious about that. By the way, Gary, one of our partners, is asking, what causes radiocarbon, carbon-14 in the first place? How does that happen?
So in the upper atmosphere, today anyways, in the upper atmosphere, solar radiation will hit, these nitrogen atoms and convert them into radiocarbon. And so there's a certain rate at which that happens. So it's called I guess you can call it the radiocarbon production rate, happens in the upper atmosphere, and where the solar intensity is higher. And then some of those newly born radiocarbon atoms in the upper atmosphere will, settle down into the lower atmosphere. They get incorporated into plants. As plants do photosynthesis, they grab carbon dioxide from their environment, make that part of their tissues, and then the animal eats the plant, thereby taking in whatever radiocarbon ratio was in the plant tissue, also gets incorporated into the animal tissue, both in sea and on land. That's the gist of where it comes from. Yeah.
So then we all make it part of our body. So you can only radiocarbon date something that was once living and either was a plant or ate plants, so that it had, like, you don't radiocarbon date rocks.
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, there's other
Okay.
radioisotope systems that are present just in rocks, like potassium argon, or the lead or the uranium lead, strontium rubidium strontium, however that works. So those are some isotope systems. But those isotopes, like, here's your one lead isotope and here's the radioactive lead isotope. Well, this goes through a series of decays, and the lead turns into a more stable lead. So if it's lead dating, you have two lead isotopes, you're looking at those. Well, it takes so long at today's decay rates for the lead to decay into a more stable version of lead. In that case, it takes so long that it's a great isotope system for people who already are predisposed to think in terms of millions and billions of years, to choose or select that particular isotope system, because they're expecting the rock to be millions of years old. So they select an isotope that takes millions of years to decay. And lo and behold, it's kind of like, garbage in, garbage out. So it's like they select an isotope system that already fits what the result that they expect and need to have.
So they're using a process that's going to match what they think the results should be anyway.
It's gonna, well, it turns out it doesn't always match, but it's gonna have a better chance of matching. Yes.
Well, I find that whole process interesting too, because we're told, oh yeah, radiometric dating, oh yeah, Earth is old, radiometric dating. This is thrown out there, when really the knowledge behind it would not conclude that, especially when you consider they came up with an old Earth age back in the 1800s, and any kind of radio dating method wasn't invented until the early 1900s. So they came up with old ages way prior to radiometric dating, right?
Oh yeah, and old Earthism became mainstream among Western scientists actually in the 1700s. And so by the time Charles Darwin's book was published in 1849 or so,
1859, yep.
59, the old Earthism was already fully entrenched in Western academic and scientific societies. And so basically that gave Darwin the canvas across which he could tell a tale about small to large, simple to complex, natural selection, crafting creatures one form into another with infinite morphing between forms. That's his story, but it can't be told unless you have the canvas of deep time. And all that, the story and the deep time, the story of evolution and the deep timeline that it utilizes, both of those were in place long before radioisotope dating was ever invented or popularized or used extensively.
Well, I want to know how mainstream scientists use carbon-14 dating. Want to know, is it reliable? Things like that. I grabbed a clip. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a clip online of Bob Enyart when he was alive. He had a radio show out of Denver, and he called Jack Horner, who famously has discovered multiple dinosaur bones, and he is the one who was over the research that Mary Schweitzer did with the soft tissue back in the early 2000s when that came out. And it's a video clip or an audio clip of him asking Jack Horner to carbon date the dinosaur bone. And I was shocked that Jack Horner refused to do it. I don't know, should I show that now or wait till after you answer kind of the question of how are scientists using this?
Let me answer first, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then if you give me an opportunity to react to that conversation between Jack and Bob, that would be nice of you.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
But basically, archaeologists use it. Archaeologists use carbon dating to look at ancient human artifacts. And so it turns out that for the most part, it's got usually it gives a really plus or minus 50 years date. Sometimes it gives the year within 10-year time frame, sometimes, but and it does it correctly. So radiocarbon works for samples that come from, let's say, the last 2,000 years or so, maybe even 2,500 years. But once you get to, well, it's a famous study done by Manfred Bietak. He's a secular Austrian archaeologist, and he's been studying this region of Egypt called Avaris, and it's where the Israelites were encamped and where they lived during their sojourn in Egypt. And he's basically discovered that. He wasn't trying to, but he was just studying Avaris, and he was like, look at all these Hebrew-looking things. And then he dated 200 artifacts from that, from all over from artifacts from Avaris. And it turns out that the radiocarbon dates are systematically 100 years off of the calendar ages, or their calendar ages, right, for the chronology that they've developed. And so there's one group of archaeologists who are saying all the radiocarbon dates are systematically getting older, 100 years older at that age, and at artifacts even older from even times before have an even greater error margin. But other archaeologists saying, no, the radiocarbon dates are fact. And so you have to go redo all your chronologies. So there's this constant debate within the chronologists' papers and the archaeologists who try to reconstruct history. So anyway, all that to say, it's reliable until you get to about the time of the Exodus, which is like 1446 BC, according to the Bible's chronology. So once you get back that far, the radiocarbon dating seems to veer. So the radiocarbon ages look systematically older than the calendar ages, and we think we have a clue as to why that is. And that's kind of the side of the debate that I land on, is that the radiocarbon dating has got problems. Now, how do we know that it does work for artifacts that are only a couple thousand years old? Well, they're from archaeological contexts that have timestamps in the same layer. And so you have pottery made during a certain era in a certain place. So pottery is characteristic of a culture and of a time when that culture lived. Or even a coin with a Roman, or an Egyptian, like a bulla, which is an Egyptian seal which has a particular pharaoh on it. So that helps to limit your time frame when that could have been deposited. So when you have someone's name, like a pharaoh's name or a Roman emperor's name on a coin or something like that, and you carbon date something from the same layer, you have a nice independent cross-check of that carbon date. And it turns out that the carbon years in those cases very often, not always, but they often match the actual calendar years that we have attached to those layers.
And they're not looking at the calendar year first and then sending that calendar year to the lab saying carbon date this, here's what we're expecting. Or is there any bias that can be going into making sure those are accurate? Or no, those are just pure scientific numbers. This is what we come back with based on a half-life of 5,730 years.
I'm sure that there's small bits of bias, but it's hard to argue against a suite of multiple independent chronological markers like that. So if you have radiocarbon years that match the calendar years that from some other time indicator, like something written like a king's name during the king's reign, well, and then you could cross-check the king's reign time with historical records where people wrote it down. Now that's really the best history. If you can go back to written records, just like in the court of law, that's how you reconstruct the past, is by going to what people wrote down, people who lived there at that time, and to reliable records of reliable eyewitnesses and historical witnesses. That's really very solid. So when you say, Eric, you say pure science, it's like, well, these are all historical sciences. We're talking about forensic analyses, basically. And so we're not talking about the same kind of science where you repeat an experiment and anyone can repeat it, and observe it, and you're watching the process happen through time in your lifetime, like right now, and you can repeat it again. That's like empirical science. That's the kind of science that develops technology, put the man on the moon, gives us cell phones, all that kind of stuff. But forensic science is reconstructing the past. And so you do different procedures, and you cannot know with as much certainty with just processes, because you have to make inferences. Has this process been going on at the same rate in the past? Did something else affect this process in the past that we're that we can't see anymore, because that whatever affected it is now done, is now gone, like Noah's flood could have affected isotope ratios and things like that, for sure, etc. But when you have people wrote it down in the past, boy, that's the way to go when it comes to history. And what you and I have landed on, I think, over the years, is coming to realize, wait a minute, the Bible itself is a reliable witness of history, written down by reliable eyewitnesses. These things really happen.
They did indeed, and that's what we base our entire trust on, is revelation from God and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I love it. It really did happen. That's to me, and I'm sorry, I'm getting on my preaching thing. I keep going, when I meet Christians that question whether it's true, I'm like, well, then do you also question whether, how you should behave? Or maybe that's why we got so many problems in the church today, because people aren't behaving like real Christians. And maybe it's because they're like wondering, I wonder if it's all really true. And it's true. We do have the written record. Man, I wonder if I have time to show this. Okay, let me show this, but I may have to save your response for after we have to let social media go. But I want social media to see this clip, okay? Bob Inyart, talking to Jack Horner, calls him up, gets him on the phone, offers him money to have his T-Rex bone radiocarbon dated. And, well, I'll let the clip speak for itself. Check this out.
Hello, Jack. This is Bob Enyart with KLTT Radio in Denver.
Uh-huh.
How are you doing?
Good.
Jack, I sent a letter offering the museum a grant of $8,000 to do a carbon-14 day test of that soft tissue T-Rex you guys dug up.
Well, carbon-14 doesn't work on something that old.
I understand that, and in the last couple of weeks, I've been able to raise a little more money, so that's up to $10,000 now, that we'd be honored to give you guys if you would consider doing that test.
Well, we can't do that test.
You can't do that.
No. Let me tell you where I'm coming from here.
Sure.
All right? Obviously, your group is a group of creationists.
Yes.
And the spin they can get off of it,
right,
doing it, is not going to help us.
Carbon-14 dating something with soft tissue in it. Jack, if I could raise $20,000, would it be worth?
I want to know what group is sponsoring it.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
It's
I need some really specific details about.
Sure.
And don't just tell it to me straight. Okay.
Of course, there's a local church here, Denver Bible Church,
Mm-hmm.
that's offered to help.
Okay.
So we could, if you guys agree, we could send you the check within 24 hours.
Okay. Well, let me talk to Mary, and
Okay.
let me just talk to a few people.
Okay.
Because I don't want to, I can't afford to have it turn into a circus.
Right.
Can't afford to have that turn into a circus. Wow. Yes, I'd love your thoughts on that, because I found that conversation fascinating. And I'm wondering, do you know, have we actually discovered any radioactive carbon in dinosaur bones? Because that would be a death blow to the idea that these things are 65 million years old.
Oh, we certainly have, and not just fossil bones, but basically anything that has carbon, any earth material that has carbon in it, seems to have some amount of radiocarbon. And we're talking even oil, deeply buried oil reserves, natural gas, coal, If it's got carbon, it's got radiocarbon, fossils, etc. So I'd be glad to talk about those things.
Wow. Okay. You're going to have to save that. I got to let my social media and my podcast listeners and television audience go. Guys, thank you for tuning in and peeking into our conversation. We're going to continue over at creationtoday.org. If you want to join the rest of the conversation and get access to every conversation we've ever had, past, present, and anything we do in the future, come on over to creationtoday.org and partner with us. It's good to get this kind of discipleship. Brian, I want them to know where to find your material. Is ICR.org is the main website for Institute for Creation Research. Is there a place on there where they just do a search for Dr. Brian Thomas to find your writings and your articles, or do you have anything you think, man, on this subject they should really get a hold of?
Yeah, I think ICR.org and just use our search feature, and we have tens of thousands of articles on any topic of origins. What about the Ice Age? What about carbon dating? And you could kind of get in the wormhole and read, for a long time. And we also have links within those articles to more technical articles, which you find on different different places. But I think the ICR.org is a nice hub to go branching off into more details from there for sure. We even have videos. We've got if you go to YouTube, we've got ICR Science, I think, is our channel, something like that. We have a YouTube channel. We talk about these issues also, including radiocarbon, I think. If not, it's coming soon.
No, you guys do. And matter of fact, I got one of those videos that I want to show our partners here in just a second. But guys, and sign up for their Acts and Facts. They have just some amazing resources that they make available. Go there and get on their email list so you're actually getting their content on a regular basis. I'm telling you, well worth you investing this time and energy to be discipled into understanding the truth of who God is and what He wants for your life. Is that good? Okay. All right. Social media. Thank you guys. Oh, next week, man, I got a great show next week. My friend Bill Cluck, he's the atheist side of the Christian Atheist Book Club that he started with James Walker. So he's going to be in studio talking with me. I'm going to do an interview with an atheist. And I'm telling you, these are some of my favorite conversations, talking to atheists. And he's more of an honest atheist. So I think you'll find his comments intriguing. Some of you atheists out there will find them downright infuriating, but he's being honest when so many other atheists are not. Join me next week live at noon on Wednesday for an interview with an atheist. I'll see you guys next week.